It appears that Netflix is acquiring Warner Brothers, and that includes HBO Max and some other properties. I say it appears because this thing could be tied up for like a year and a half. There's so many people who have to weigh in. The Trump administration, things about antitrust. There's already folks protesting this merger or acquisition. There's folks who say Netflix doesn't care about theatrical, and so everything's going to be streaming now. Not sure about that. Like, Netflix is even premiering its Stranger Things finale in theaters at the end of the year. But I can't really speak to like Harry Potter or DC Comics or any of this other stuff because I am into horror. Morbidly Beautiful is a horror network. Video of the Damned is a horror show. So that's what we're going to talk about. What are the implications for horror? Here's a couple, I think. Just my opinion. I don't think this merger or acquisition really is going to affect where theatrical versus streaming was going anyway. Like, there's so much that's just thrown onto streaming after its theatrical release anyway. You can dislike that trend. There's plenty who don't. There's plenty who'd rather watch stuff at home and not pay a bunch of money to go into a theater and deal with rowdy crowds and sticky seats. But either way, yes, Netflix will have a bigger piece of the pie if this is allowed to go through, but what's to say Netflix doesn't want to branch out and do more theatrical? What's to say that this isn't their doorway into doing other things beyond streaming? We'll find out. Some are worried that the voice of horror is going to be suppressed because a bigger company, a bigger piece of the pie. Look, I like schlock, I like trash, I like indie flicks, I like film, festival, horror. I like a bunch of stuff that was never going to get a major theatrical release anyway. Stuff that Warner Brothers wasn't going to put out and might end up on Netflix if they're lucky. That world remains. Independent filmmakers and DIY art remains, regardless of what big companies are doing. Just like punk rock has always been a thing, well, since the 70s. You can go into the 60s if you want to look at... We're not here to talk about punk rock. Bands have always been able to get gigs and put out their own records and have their own fan base apart from major labels. Indie horror is going to persist similarly. They never were going to go through those big leagues anyway, and that's fine. That's what we love about it. What about the major franchises? Well, Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema does own Nightmare on Elm Street, but we also haven't had a new entry in like 15 years. Maybe Netflix having a piece of that will expedite matters, but you still need to sign off from the Wes Craven estate. What about The Conjuring? I'm not a big Conjuring guy, but maybe you're a big Conjuring fan. That franchise was already in transition anyway, right? We're either moving into a Conjuring television series or a new set of movies with new actors, and maybe those are all going to be on streaming anyway. Who's to say? My point is that ownership has always been a struggle. Look at Friday the 13th. Look at Army of Darkness / Evil Dead and where different pieces of those are. Even Hellraiser gets complicated because Clive Barker owns part of it, but there is that Hulu reboot, and that could become its own thing. Capitalism and corporations are always going to have their thumb on the scale and their finger in the pie. That hasn't changed, even if it is Netflix having a bigger piece. And you can debate it all you want. You can debate antitrust. You can debate whether Paramount should have had a better shot, although it seems like most people I've heard of would rather Netflix and Paramount own Warner Brothers. Regardless of how you feel about those nuances, if you're like me and you just like horror and you just like independent voices and independent filmmaking, I don't think that's going to change. Maybe some of your old favorites like your Beetlejuice or what have you, maybe that you're going to watch it on a different streaming channel. if you don't already like own the DVD or just still put in your dusty old VHS tape. These things always change too. I'm always having to keep an eye on what's on Netflix, what's on Tubi, what's on HBO Max, what's on Paramount. But I'm still going to go onto theaters, and there's still going to be movies that get theatrical releases, and there's still going to be film festivals. This all continues. You can't keep a good thing like horror down, no matter who's in charge. They're not in charge of you. All the movies I'm excited about coming out this like next year or so, you know, like Until You're Alone, Meat, Hollow Lake. Yeah, those are going to come out in festivals and independent theaters and places where I would get to see them anyway. Or, you know, I buy the Blu-ray from the filmmaker. I wasn't waiting for it to pop up on HBO Max or Netflix. I would love for my friends who make movies to have success, and good on them. And we've seen plenty of like mainstream horror stuff like Barbarian and Weapons. That's great for Zach Crager, right? Hey, if anything, Netflix might get more experimental. They might want to buy up and put out and try out more horror. And as my friend Joe Castro would say, just be wary of distributors. Like, that part of the game hasn't changed. You always just have to look out and be careful. So not much changes for people and fans like you and me, and for the filmmakers, the indie filmmakers that we love. I mean, best case scenario, we get a new Freddy thing. And worst case scenario, like the trend continues and nothing changes that wasn't already kind of shitty. So this is my Morbidly Beautiful Video of the Damned op-ed special report on the Netflix Warner Brothers acquisition or merger. I'm more worried about wrestling because Netflix has WWE and HBO Max has AEW. We'll find out in like a year and a half.